Just so that they chose the new pope. Of course, I turned them down for the job, but they still chose a American cardinal very strongly. Bob from Chicago. He wants us to call him Leo now, but we're not going to do that. We're going to call him Bob. Bob seems like a nice guy, but he's had some not nice things to say about me and about JD. Of course, Bob is from a radical left Democrat city called Chicago. So we're going to look into it very strongly, and if this gets ugly, we might just have to send JD to pay him a little visit. And you know how that goes for popes, Bob.
And live from Times Square, it's That Kevin Show.
Somewhere in the bowels of the city that never sleeps,
Kevin McCullough, radio host with Salem Media,
is a man also not sleeping.
Syndicated radio talk show host Kevin McCullough.
And that guy would like a word with you.
Many of you know him as Vostradamus.
Of course, That Kevin Show is going to be great. The only thing that could be greater, of course, would be That Donald Show. We don't have that, so we have That Kevin Show.
Featuring the music of Dick Tunney and the Dream in Color Orchestra. Still to come, Trump's tariffs, former Ambassador Kip Tom on their impact on American farmers. Fossil fuels, the heroes or the enemy? Ed Kovalik rejoins. Standing up for women, Linnea Saltz and Christian Solidarity International. Sketch comedy from the puppet regime, Al Berry and Nick Peterson. And making their debut, Sons of Sunday in the Spotlight. And now, from Times Square, a man who is so New York that this week he gave a tourist directions, all while getting mugged. Here's the Kevin!
Not sure if that's exactly how it went down, but I did spend some time in Times Square just last night, actually. We had a big radio show thanks to the Times Square Alliance and Tom Harris, T-Square himself, etc. You would know about it if you subscribe to That Passport Life, the new travel product that we are doing here at That Kevin Show, and very, very proud of it. But Christine Nicholas and I got to speak to two of the best food people in New York. The guy that's responsible for Serendipity, you've heard of the frozen hot chocolate? They've got like 25 of them now. Different flavors, different things. They're so good. But also, and one I really liked was Mike Cologne. That's Joe Calderone over at Serendipity 3. But Mike Cologne doing the stuff over at Virgil's Barbecue, where you've just got this, I don't know, cacophony of flavors that are coming at you. It's so wonderful. Anyway, that was my little Times Square dalliance for fun this week, and glad to be back here in the studio and back with you this weekend. So thank you for taking us with you. Got a lot to talk about. Kevin McCullough couldn't be happier. I don't know what he's talking about. Stop saying people are getting mugged. People aren't getting mugged. It's safe. We're the safest big city in the country again. Yep. We've regained that title, so we need to be telling people the good news, which is it's wonderful to come to New York City. Kind of like the wonderful news that President Trump had this week when he announced the big trade deal with the UK. Who had that on their bingo card? I mean, unless you were in the administration, you kind of felt, well, see, I have mixed feelings about it. You kind of felt like something was going to come down big on the trade front at some point in time. But who would have imagined that on VE Day, the day that we got victory in Europe and we kicked Hitler's little fanny, who would have thought that on that day we would announce the biggest renegotiation of the trade imbalance with the UK that we've ever had with them, and doing it in such a way where if you look at the numbers of what they had been tariffing us for our products to come there, and now what they are putting on us, we reduced that by 80%. By 80%, we reduced the rate of what we have to pay to get our products in there, and we now have a larger imbalance going the other direction. They have to now pay, so we're down to 1% in terms of total cost on tariffs going in. They have to pay 3% to get their stuff in the good old U.S. of A. Do you know what it was before? 5%. We were paying 5% to get in, and they were paying, I forgot what they were paying, but now they're paying 3 to come here. We're only paying 1 to go there. And it's long past due. The president was, he was rightfully outraged at some of the press this week for trying to convince, the media has been trying to convince the country that we need to go into a recession and that we're going to go into a recession. A recession is, unavoidable. You keep looking at how the markets have responded. You look at how they responded this week to the UK trade deal. And friends, it's the first domino. There's going to be a ton of these that come down the pike. And you know what that does? Every time it does, it takes us and puts us on better financial footing with every partner that we trade with. And it increasingly takes China and pushes them back into the little corner, the little cave from whence they came. They're not going to be able to stay at the kind of level that they're at with world influence if they're continually being isolated. And that's what so the Trump tariffs are doing 2 things. They are increasing our economic viability worldwide and our production and our output. And say, Kev, that's going to take a little while. A little bit. But look at all the companies that are investing all the money in producing their products here. We've had, 3 dozen companies now announce $500 million or more that are coming into the country and saying, we're going to do $500 million in development. Well, when those guys want to go overseas and they want to sell their products, now they're going to find open doors. Before they found closed doors, or they found doors that had to be jimmied a little bit because the tariffs were so bad, the trade imbalance was so bad. Now we're going to have the lower rates to go into markets with, and more of the world is going to get to see the high quality of American products. This is a really big win for us all the way around. And I don't understand how, I can actually understand. So Jen Psaki gets on this last week on MSNBC. She's now in prime time. This is going to be great. And she has an X number of audience the first night, and then the next night she drops by more than 50%. 53% abandoned her on night 2. Psaki bombs. She's going to keep bombing. You know why? Because she's going to tell you lies about this stuff. She's going to tell you why all this stuff's not working and supposedly. But you know who's telling you the truth besides me? The market. Look at your gas price. Look at your price of eggs. Look at the price of groceries in general. Look at the cost of heating or cooling your home. Look at the overall quality of life. You're already starting to see impact from just some of the implications of these tariffs and these renegotiated deals. And over time, that's just going to get hotter and hotter and hotter as it goes along. If you rewind the tape back to the first Trump term, you had a very similar thing happen with the economy there. He comes in, he does limited tariffs, much more limited than he's doing now. And just from that amount of renegotiation, the American economy really started to sizzle. And in fact, just before COVID, it had reached its white hot peak. We were adding jobs. The prices of things were coming down. You could not believe the wins that we were racking up. And then COVID hit, and it destroyed all of it because somebody wanted us to have it destroyed. Sadly, even some people within our own country, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Well, gain of function research isn't going to be done in the U.S. anymore as of this week. That's also a big win. So we're winning all the way around when it comes to this. Hey, real quickly, I just want to say thank you to those of you that have gotten us off to the start that we have with Christian Solidarity International. We are liberating women who have been abused and enslaved in the African country of Northern Sudan. And we are bringing them home for $250, one-time gift. They not only receive their freedom, but they get an entire emergency survival kit that's going to launch them into their new life. It gives them a year's worth of food, a year's worth of grain to plant for a following year's worth of food. They get all kinds of tools and little helps for their life. And then they're also going to get a she-goat that's going to give them a little micro enterprise for their future. And it is an amazing, amazing thing. And we are so honored to be part of it. But we're also very honored that you have stepped up, because we've already seen more than a dozen of these women set free this year. Our goal is 208. So thank you to those of you that have already jumped in. 888-342-1010, 888-342-1010, 888-342-1010. You can also go to bringherhome.org, bringherhome.org. You can make your gift there and then be on your way. Some of you help us every single year with this, and we couldn't do it without you. But we've liberated more than 200 women every year for the last several years, and we want to do that again this year. So please do everything that you can to make that possible. 888-342-1010. And bringherhome.org. Kevin McCullough, huge show. Sons of Sunday is with us in the spotlight today, and much, much more. Stick around. It's That Kevin Show from Times Square in New York. Welcome back to That Kevin Show, thatkevinshow.com, That Kevin Show, all social media. And if you use that old-fashioned thing called email, thatkevinshow@gmail.com. People still do use that, right? Anyway, I read them if you send them, so send them. You know that we love to talk to America First Policy Institute. We love all things America First policy. In national security, in the economy, in the way we educate our kids, in every aspect of life, putting America first is what the federal government should be focused on. That's why we elect them, is to go and do the nation's business. For some reason, politicians a few years ago started thinking it's their job to bleed tears of sadness over every other circumstance on planet Earth. We can do that as private citizens. We do that. We help charities. We feed people. I am involved in organizations that do just that. But what about the American citizen? That's where government should be focusing. And we've talked with almost every policy leader with AFPI over the last few years, but they've just launched a brand new initiative, and we have not had the chance to speak with former Ambassador Kip Tom, who was the U.S. Ambassador to the UN for Food and Agriculture, and he was the ambassador to the Rome-based UN agencies from 2019 to 2021. But he is an eighth-generation Indiana farmer. He's from the heartland. He's from the Midwest, where it all happens. Ambassador Kip Tom, welcome to That Kevin Show. Good to have you.
It's a pleasure to be on the Kevin Show today.
Let's talk about farming in America. Why do the farmers of America, the farming community of America, need a government focus on putting farmers first?
Well, it's not only about the farmers. We need to understand that, our nation's national security is dependent upon our food security. And if you have the wrong policies in place, all of a sudden your food security continues its downward movement, as we've seen over the last 4 years under the Biden administration.
Yeah.
We lacked focus on trade. We lacked a focus on bringing new innovations to the market. And I think the America First Policy Institute, they want to do what they can for the Farmers First strategy to make sure they shore up and bring back innovation into agriculture, create robust trading around the world. At the same time, reshoring some of those supply chains that we've moved offshore around the world to some of our adversaries. In the meantime, driving rural prosperity, right-sizing USDA, make sure they're reoriented to doing what they're intended to do by the original charter. And again, then focus on nutrition, making sure that we're feeding Americans and those around the world that we feed and export to a nutritious food product.
Let's talk about what you called right-sizing USDA. Obviously, DOGE is running through departments, and they're trying to find every which way to save money for the American taxpayer. What is USDA when it's right-sized in your mind?
Obviously, we've seen a large drop in the numbers of farmers that they serve, but let's remember this first. When we look at the farm bill that's managed by the USDA, this proposed bill that's up right now is nearly a $1.5 trillion bill over the next 5 years. 83% of that is driven towards Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, or food aid. for a lot of those Americans that are hungry around the country. The 17% then goes back towards farmers to help support crop insurance and other initiatives to strengthen our agricultural system. So I think it's important that we're engaged with this, but again, we can do it a lot less people at USDA. And I think there's some agencies that the USDA touches, like the UN organization, the Food and Agriculture Organization. I had some leadership roles in that when I was in Rome, Italy, and we spent about $110 million a year there for our mandatory contribution. But there's probably another $500, $600, $700 million that is voluntary that I can't support that it's getting that much done and creating resilience and capacity in food systems. So DOGE has got a lot of work in front of them. We're here to support them, and let's get this agency doing what it needs to do.
Yeah. When you think about, and you've been a part of a family that's done it for 8 generations, when you think about the modern plight of the American farmer, I think a lot of people that live on the coasts have no real idea what the challenges are. And they probably have either an antiquated view of what farming is, or they think technology has solved all the problems and there's nothing left to worry about. The truth is no doubt somewhere in between, but give us a profile of the American farmer. What are they up against? What are they dealing with?
Well, I think a lot of those people live along the coastline, which is the majority of the country, lives in urban areas or along the coastlines. When they look at agriculture, they think more of that Norman Rockwell painting of a white picket fence and a red barn in the background and a few head of livestock running around. And they're still there today. God bless them. We love those, and we do that ourselves at a point. But it's a business. We know we have a task in front of us to grow the economy in the United States. We know we need to feed the Americans in the U.S., give them a reliable, dependable, resilient, and safe food supply at an affordable price. At the same time, we want to create economies of scale so we can be a player in a national or an international scene. I can tell you, I just came back from Brazil just a few weeks ago and looked at their agriculture system and hadn't been there for 10 years. I'll be honest with you, they have fast forwarded past us over the past 10 years, and we need to get back engaged and make sure we push up the business level of agriculture and make sure we're delivering the products that the consumers need in the United States and our customers around the world.
From that aspect, how do you perceive tariff going on every country on the planet that we have any engagement with, which is pretty much every country on the planet? How do you see those interacting with the current situation that farmers face?
Yeah, I support the president's position on tariffs. I think they're, with President Trump, they're the means to the end. It's what we needed to do.
Well, has agriculture, and specifically the food supply, has it been taken greater advantage of in some ways? Because I think when I go to the produce section of my local grocery store, you got fruits and vegetables, and they have the little stamps on them from every country on the planet. And I'm like, was any of this grown in the U.S.? I'm having a hard time finding that sometimes. Is that reality? Have they taken advantage of our markets?
They have. When you look at, we import nearly 65% of our fruits and vegetables from around the world. There's a number of issues. It's labor, it's regulations that have grown over the Biden administration, but all of our supply chain has been moved around the world, as I said, as well. So it's time we bring supply chains back. It's time we bring this fruits and vegetable production back to the United States. I bring you up this one point. During COVID, because of some of the restrictions of workers being able to work in California to harvest some of the fruits and vegetables, we had nearly 6 million acres of fruits and vegetables go to waste because we didn't have the workforce to harvest that crop. So we're very vulnerable. We're very sensitive to labor shocks, weather shocks, and obviously policy. But again, I think America First Policy Institute and what we're doing in Farmers First Strategy will focus in on these issues and make sure that we deliver them to Congress.
Last question before we go to break. Has the president addressed this significantly in your mind, or is there more conversation that needs to take place? In other words, he has so many things on the radar screen. Where does this fall in the list of priorities, do you think?
Well, there's no question. When you look back at this election in 2024 here, President Trump won 31 states. 16 of those states were the number one driver of their GDP was agriculture. And when you look at it on a county basis, he won 433 out of 444 agriculture counties, rural counties across the United States. I think President Trump realizes the importance of agriculture, whether it's in policy that affects renewable fuels or protein production, animal protein, or our crops or our exports. President Trump knows agriculture, and he wants to support the American farmer and rancher. And that's what we're going to talk about at AFPI.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. From New York, That Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to Times Square. Kevin McCullough, glad to have you with us. We've got a lot happening on today's show, and I'm glad to welcome back someone who I got very excited about when I saw his little company launch, and then it went to the NASDAQ, and now it's continued to make waves. And over the last few days, some big news continuing to unfold. Ed Kovalik is back with us from a little website called oilfacts.com and an oil company called Prairie Operating Group that is doing domestic energy, the cleanest molecule of energy being produced anywhere. Ed, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Hey, it's great to see you, Kevin.
Lots of news surrounding your little engine that can this week. What's going on?
You know, we're just blowing and going with our development program. As you know, we recently acquired assets from Bayswater that were pretty substantial in value, about $600 million for their proven reserves and locations. And now we're getting after it in terms of fracking some of the locations that we acquired from them. Specifically 9 wells that were already drilled, but not yet completed. And then we've also begun our drilling and completions operations on assets that we acquired from our prior acquisition from Nickel Road. So, you know, just executing on our development program.
Compared to where you were even at the beginning of the year, what's the difference in terms of output and volume?
Well, we've really transformed the size of the company vis-a-vis the last transaction. I think we're pushing close to about 28,000 barrels a day of production right now, and have our sights set on growing from here pretty aggressively through the rest of the year and into next. I think when we spoke last, beginning of the year, we were about 10% at that level. So, you know, the deal we did with Bayswater was certainly transformational in size for us. How are you feeling about the kind of global energy picture? I know that some people are not happy with the administration taking kind of the rough toe of the line tactics on tariffs and several other things, but I'm just curious your feelings on maybe the long-term picture on all this. You know, I don't think really that the macro for our industry has changed much. And maybe that's an unusual thing to say in the context of potential demand destruction vis-a-vis tariffs. But I tend to come out on the side of thinking that this is probably a temporary situation or recalibration of global trade, really a recalibration a little bit on just the economics of global trade. But I don't think China is going to be successful in finding new markets to replace the greatest market in the world, which is the United States, which I think will force a recalibration in the economics of global trade rather than where it's actually traded. We have not seen demand for oil decrease ever year to year. The only 2 times we've seen it happen episodically is when we had the financial crisis in 07, 08, which this does not feel like to me. And when we had COVID, which this is also certainly doesn't feel like that to me. So I think this being neither of those 2 really needle moving events that have seen, demand destruction in oil and gas, I just remain optimistic that demand is going to continue to go up every year for our product. Well, I think that bodes well. You've done a couple of things that kind of also give you an advantage. One is you've hedged some price guarantees for the rest of the year. How does that work? I mean, for people that don't follow this day to day, how does something like that get executed, and what does it mean to you? Sure. So, it's typical for oil and gas companies to hedge their production to some extent, which is essentially selling in advance barrels that we're going to produce in the future. And it's really just a way to mitigate risks so that we're not 100% exposed to the price of the commodity, whether it goes up or down. And so we tend to be fairly risk averse folks, and our culture is fairly risk averse. So when we closed on the Bayswater acquisition, we valued those assets in that moment in time based on the price of oil and gas at that moment in time. So it was important for us to lock in that value at that moment in time. So we essentially sold forward 85% or so of the production from those assets for the next 3 years to de-risk. In hindsight, it made us look really smart because prices came down. I guess if prices had gone up by 10%, it would have made us look maybe too conservative. But I'd always like to err on the side of being seen as too conservative rather than, too, adventurous with our capital.
PROP is the operating group's stock symbol, and Ed Kovalik is their president, and he's with us. Ed, thank you so much for stopping by.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Kevin.
For more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. From New York, That Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to That Kevin Show. One of the things that we talk about a lot is how to rescue some of these slaves from South Sudan that got taken by people in the north back when it was just one country, Arabs mostly, Islamic jihadists who believe that they have a right to subjugate innocent women and children. They've subjected them to the most horrendous treatment for the last dozens of years. And every year we have a chance to see some of those liberated and brought home. If you'd like more information on how to give, just go to bringherhome.org. That's where you can give directly to the issue that we are talking about now. But I want to give you csi-usa.org. That is the homepage of Christian Solidarity International, and it really does go into greater detail of all the things that they are involved in, from the conflict in Syria, from the massive genocide that's been taking place in Nigeria over the last couple of years. And Rob Davis rejoins us as head of that, talking to us about this. But Rob, last year, when we would literally get on the air to talk about Nigeria, we were the only media outlet, I think, on planet Earth that was doing that. No one was covering what was happening. Now, I will say in the last few weeks that the Trump administration has acknowledged some things, and there's been just a little trickle of stories that have come out about some of the most recent atrocities. But it is still a far cry from anything that would resemble mainstream media coverage of something like that. And so I really see the value of what CSI is doing, because you've got to be standing there waving the flag saying, guys, pay attention to this. It really does matter.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't, who is? That really is what it boils down to. And so I would encourage you, your listeners. I know you gave it just a minute ago, but you can get detailed information of the various countries that we serve, the various projects that we're involved in at csi-usa.org. That's csi-usa.org. And we invite you to just take a look there. Many of these countries, again, like I was saying to you previously, Kevin, these are places we can't even find on a map. I mean, somebody in the country, where is it? Let's be honest, most of our geography just isn't that good. And we don't talk about these countries, and nobody's talking about it in the news. But there are brothers and sisters in Christ who are being slaughtered, who are being imprisoned. I was just a part of an effort to reach out to our Secretary of State this past week with regard to somebody who's been unjustly put in jail in Syria. So we're asking the State Department here to get involved. But nobody's talking about this. I mean, it's the type of thing that if you're not on our mailing list, if you're not checking our website, if you're not listening to your program, Kevin, I know you do a tremendous job of, especially as you mentioned before, Dr. Joel Veldkamp, who is our international communications director, who does a phenomenal job of briefing.
I don't know how he keeps track of everything. Like, there's so much going on, but let me just.
I'm a far cry. Joel can keep up with the best, and I'm just doing well to try and keep up with him.
Yeah, well, they've got you handling the stuff here in the U.S., and that's important because this is where so much of the help can come from, friends. And those of you listening, some of you have given in years past, and I know that there's been a couple of people that have given in excess of $15,000 to what we do with CSI. And I'm grateful for those of you that care deeply enough to dig deep and really commit. When you do that, your dollars are being magnified in terms of what they accomplish in ways that you can't even begin to imagine. But I will touch on the slavery issue for a second, Rob. This is, I don't know, it's our 115th year doing it or something like that. It feels like we've just done it since the beginning of time. But these are women that were largely spoils of war. I mean, we think of not trying to make people property, and yet that's exactly what happened in the Sudanese civil war. And when we bring them back, we give them something that I feel fairly certain they gave up a long time ago on ever believing that they would ever have again, which is a brand new life. And you're able to do it for $250, which is almost exclusively used for the resettlement and all the stuff they need to start their life over again. There's a small amount that's used for a vaccine that is bartered for the slave's release, but other than that, that is all going into giving that slave a brand new life. And I'm just curious, people have asked me, how do you do it? How do you do it for a one-time gift of $250, take someone's life and allow them to start completely over again?
Yeah, I mean, and you know, Kevin, when you think about it, $250 to give someone their life back. It really is kind of that simple. And as you said, you know, there was a civil war, and I'm dumbing this down because it's easy for me to understand. And you know, Joel can explain this a whole lot more eloquently. But it was a civil war, and essentially they said, okay, we're going to settle this thing. Muslims in the north, you can take these Christians in the south, and that's your prize. Go home. And you know,
but nobody did anything about the slaves.
Yeah, a couple 100,000 people all of a sudden lost their freedom, and ever since the late 1980s, we've been bringing them home. So apt, the website you direct people to bring her home. You know, but we were able. The crazy thing is that these primarily Muslim cattle farmers value their cattle more than they value a human life. And so for what amounts to a $25 vaccine to keep their cattle from disease, they say, okay, you can take a person, go ahead. And they free them. And then the rest of that donation, as you said, the rest of that $250 is spent getting them back to their communities, getting them back to what's remaining of their families, getting them back to the churches that they had worshiped in, setting them up with some micro enterprise, giving them a goat so that they can have milk and produce cheese, giving them farming tools so that they can have a micro enterprise and do a little bit of kind of home farming and sell some vegetables and things like that, so that they can support themselves. But as you said, you've heard enough stories, Kevin, over what is it? You said these 150 years we've been together. But they almost all reference the fact they had they were crying out to God, asking for him to answer, but had felt long forgotten. And one day a slave liberator, comes into their village and buys their freedom back, essentially.
And it is really a beautiful thing. Rob, thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you for letting us be part of this. And please keep us posted on all the good news of 30 years. I mean, that is a real landmark to celebrate, and we celebrate with you this year.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
You got it. Kevin McCullough coming back from Times Square. Don't go away.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.
Terry, we have had to deport Kilmar Abrego Garcia because he was here illegally, and he has MS-13 gang tattoos.
Well, I'm not an expert, but those letters were photoshopped there as a legend to interpret what each symbol represents. Although I interpreted the marijuana leaf to mean he's probably a well-regarded botanist.
No, Terry, he's not a botanist. He has MS-13 tattooed on his knuckles, look. And you can clearly see he's affiliated with the Shutterstock cartel.
Mr. President, that's a watermark. It means you didn't pay for the image.
Terry, you're blowing your big break. I picked you because I thought you were good, but now I see you're another scared little fake news fat boy. I bet you were fat when you were a kid, weren't you?
Mr. President, please, that's completely unprofessional.
Little fatty fake news Terry. Blowing up the opportunity of a lifetime to make fake news by telling me the letters MS-13 are photoshopped.
They are fake.
I knew you'd say that, you little fake news fatty.
As I said, Mr. President, I'm not an expert.
You're a little gay fatty fake news, Terry.
Again, I'm not an expert, but I'm certainly not gay.
It's hard to tell. All I see is a little gay fatty fake news.
Well, I'm not an expert.
Hello?
Did you seriously post an image of yourself dressed as the Pope?
I did. I did it because I know I'd make a great Pope.
Well, as someone who's 1/1000th Catholic, I can't even begin to describe how offended I am.
To be honest, Elizabeth, I don't really care. I recommend you use your free time to become 1/1000th good at something.
Somewhere in the bowels of the city that never sleeps
Kevin McCullough, radio host with Salem Media,
is a man also not sleeping.
Syndicated radio talk show host Kevin McCullough.
And that guy would like a word with you.
Many of you know him as Votes-for-Damas.
Of course that Kevin show is going to be great. The only thing that could be greater, of course, would be that Donald show. We don't have that, so we have that Kevin show.
Featuring the music of Dick Tunney and the Dream in Color Orchestra. Still to come, will the NCAA ever learn its lesson about boys and girls sports? Linnea Saltz tells her story. Jarrett Lemaster is back with part 2 of this exclusive with the Babylon Bee. Rescuing girls one life at a time out of slavery, Christian solidarity stands with us and them. And Sons of Sunday back in the spotlight. And now, from Times Square, a man who survived Newark Airport's chaos, construction, and ground stops without committing a felony. Here's that Kevin!
For Assignment Desk Weekend, I'm Kevin McCullough. Up first, Paramount is reportedly mulling over whether to settle Donald Trump's $500 million lawsuit over his unapproved appearance in their January 6th Democracy Dies with a Bad Hair Day documentary. The president, who's known to make cameos in things like Home Alone and courtroom dramas, didn't sign off on his footage to be used by CBS News. Now stars at CBS and some Democrats are pressuring the company to pay Trump off. Which is wild because not long ago, these same people told us to never settle with Trump. Meanwhile, in Olympic-adjacent absurdity, USA Fencing is slashing its own credibility faster than Zorro on Red Bull. A woman's fencing athlete complained about having to compete against a transgender-identifying male. For voicing this opinion, she was dragged before a DEI tribunal that sounded more like the Spanish Inquisition with better branding. She's been smeared online, threatened, possibly career canceled, and the governing body is now investigating her. Because nothing says fair compensation like forcing women to duel biological men, then punishing them for not loving it. Elsewhere in electoral gaslighting, a Democrat running in a Trump district just purged her social media like a guilty boyfriend deleting old texts. She used to have gushy posts about AOC and the Squad and various socialist scams, and they've all mysteriously vanished. It's almost like she realized voters in swing districts prefer jobs to pronouns and bacon to Bernie. She's gone from tax the rich to please don't Google me in just under 6 weeks. And speaking of vanishing acts, Jen Psaki's primetime MSNBC show just lost 53% of its audience in its second edition. Turns out smug condescension and sepia-toned soft lighting isn't enough to keep people awake after 8 p.m. Psaki blamed the ratings drop on viewers, quote, needing to process democracy. which is a fancy way of saying they changed the channel to reruns of Law & Order because at least that show has a plot. Her show is called Inside with Jen Psaki, but based on the numbers, Americans would rather be outside with anyone else. Could also call it Psaki Bombs. Over at Newark Airport, the FAA issued a ground stop due to construction. Yes, the entire airport was frozen mid-Thursday because someone forgot you can't run jackhammers next to jet engines. If you were stuck on the tarmac wondering why your plane wasn't moving, it wasn't a terror alert or bad weather. It was just New Jersey being New Jersey. And somewhere at LaGuardia, a junior janitor is laughing, saying, "See, I told you we're not the worst." In shocking political book news, Trump fired the Librarian of Congress. That's right. Democrats are in full meltdown over the idea that the man who once said, "I love the poorly educated," now has opinions on library science. They've called it a disgrace, a constitutional crisis, and worst of all, bad optics. But maybe they're just mad because the new librarian promised to organize the archives using actual history instead of intersectional Marxism and drag queen coloring books. Science now confirming what every Florida man already knew. A brand new study, they studied this, says that every alligator attack is, quote, the fault of humans. The study does not say how many of those humans were drunk, holding raw chicken, or trying to take selfies with the gator at the time. But apparently, if you get too close to a prehistoric death lizard with about 80 teeth, there's your problem. Thanks, science. Next up, bears don't like to be spooned. And finally, America's sweetheart, and one of my crushes, Dolly Parton, made headlines for doing something totally unexpected. She just said no. The icon refused to be a judge on American Idol or The Voice, explaining that she doesn't want to crush anyone's dreams. Imagine that. Someone in showbiz that knows how to show empathy. Meanwhile, the rest of Hollywood crushes dreams for sport. But Dolly walks away from fame because she values kindness. Honestly, at this point, let's give her the nuclear codes. For Assignment Desk Weekend, I'm Kevin McCullough.
When companies give in to cancel culture, they hire me for their rebranding and or product design modifications. In other words, I'm the go-to graphic designer for all things virtue signal. Now with crickets. My name's Nick Peterson, and I'm a creative director for Cancel Crises. I was busy in 2020. Companies were getting killed left and right trying to appease the woke mobs. They're like the bubonic plague on society. You ever see Monty Python? Bring out your dead. You want me to put non-binary or just make it potato head? 2020 was to businesses what 2007 was to Britney Spears. A serious haircut. The heck is a cracker, Jill? When the CEO of Goya came out in support of President Trump, protests broke out. So they hired me for damage control. 45% of their workforce is Hispanic. What are they thinking? Nothing says progress like trying to destroy thousands of Hispanic jobs. So you want me to remove the Native American but keep the land? I don't think this is going to look the way you think it's going to look. No, I don't mean the logo. I can see the reasoning behind some of them, but I knew we reached peak stupidity when I was commissioned to design social distancing logos. I also get a lot of jobs I'm uncomfortable with. I mean, some of these people accomplish great things, but hey, somewhere out there is a middle-aged white woman who's happy. Probably Maine or Oregon. Uncle Ben is history. And just like that, an 80-year legacy erased with the click of a button. It's not just retailers I've worked with. I've helped with the redesign of band names. What if we just... like it never happened? I should call it Dixie Chicks. Sports teams, I was hired to change the Indians logo. The Redskins reached out and asked if I would do it pro bono for experience. I said, sure. and I gave them what they paid for. The Chiefs and the Braves are the exception because they win. But apparently you play under 500 year after year and people start questioning, like, is that logo racist? At the end of the day, I have to assume that these marketing gurus are making the best long-term decisions. One project I did work on backfired for over a billion dollar loss. I won't say who, but it was a big company. So, 'tis but a scratch.
Ready or not, we'll be right back. That Kevin. Now, back to That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to Times Square, Kevin Show, kevinshow.com, That Kevin Show on all social media, and even on email. Some people still use email. Did you know that? That Kevin Show at gmail.com gets you connected with me. There's probably no microphone or show on the planet that has covered the story more of men and women's sports over the last 6 years, 10 years than I have. And we tend to get to this point where we think, oh, everything's been taken care of because Trump got elected and he signed the executive orders and everything. Everybody's playing nice now, right? Turns out they're not. Turns out they don't have any intention to do so at all. And even the NCAA, who originally said, well, yeah, we'll jump in, they haven't really come to the table with any substantive change. So lawsuits are still going forward. And a lot of the stories that we've told you about are still in process. My next guest has one of those stories because the potential of what it meant for her final year of eligibility at the college level was very stark. Linnea Saltz is her name, and she joins us now. Linnea, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share my story with you.
When you were growing up, would you have ever thought you would have been forced to compete against boys at the highest level of expertise?
No, not at all. I spent the vast majority of my life actually training as a gymnast and a dancer, and it was very separate of women and girls in sex. I went to a fully girl-dominated gym for gymnastics, same with my dance studio. I never really had to worry about men and women's sports ever, to be honest. Competed in high school without having to worry about it, and thought that I was going to finish out college without having the same worries. However, it wasn't until my senior year of eligibility within the NCAA that all of that changed.
Yeah, let's go there. That happened a year ago. What happened?
This actually happened in 2019.
Oh, I apologize. Go ahead.
No worries. In 2019, I was a senior at Southern Utah University in Cedar City, Utah. I'd competed on the women's team for the past 3 years as a 400, 800 meter specialist. I had just come off of winning the Big Sky Conference Championship the year before. I was nationally ranked. I broke a multitude of school records at my university. And so I was feeling pretty good going into my senior year. However, my head coach during fall training, so fall of 2019, came and informed me that the first ever male to female transgender athlete competing in NCAA Division I athletics was going to be competing against us. Not only was it going to be an athlete that was familiar to me, but they were familiar to me as they had been competing on the men's team at the University of Montana for the past 3 years. So very similar to the story that brought a lot of limelight to this situation with William turning to Leah Thomas. Same situation. Jonathan competed at the University of Montana as a man for 3 years, took a redshirt year, worked with a private practice physician of his choosing to take hormone suppression therapy, whatever that meant to the NCAA at that time, came back and decided to compete as a female.
I'm guessing that he had a pretty good run that year.
Yes. So unfortunately, this was the 2019-2020 season. So going into 2020, none of us knew that COVID was going to take place. However, this male-bodied athlete, was dominating in cross country, dominating in indoor track, and would have continued to dominate through into the outdoor season. However, our season was cut short in March of 2020 due to the COVID pandemic, but was looking pretty positive that he was going to continue on an upwards trajectory. Him and his team had already placed second in the distance medley relay in the Big Sky Conference Championships. He had won first place in the mile and indoors, and this was an individual that wasn't placing in the top 8 in the male category the year prior.
Well, and that's the bottom line for several of these cases. These are very underachieving men that are in highly competitive areas. They're not doing as well as they would like. By the way, William Thomas and this fella here, still very good athletes. And, you know, compared to the average person, compared to the average couch potato, you know, they have a lot to be proud of. The insistence that it be something that they experience at in the college arena and get the fame and glory of the medal and whatever, I don't think that's. I don't even think that even should play into someone's mind. Like if you're aiming for your very, very best to be the best that you can be, that really isn't a measure of what other people are doing. It's you against yourself. But in this situation, Linnea, and in the one with William Thomas, you had guys that had been in the guys' competitive arena and just had flunked out. They just hadn't done what they wanted to do. It's hard for me as a father of boys and daughter. It's hard for me to look at that and go anything other than you're just being vain. This is not necessary. You're going to say whatever you have to say to get onto the team and to do what you want to do. But your world record, state record, whatever record it is as a woman is always going to be a big fat asterisk that doesn't really mean a lot. Am I wrong?
No, I think you are completely correct in what you just mentioned. And it will be an asterisk that women competing in women's sports, women holding women's records, at this point, we're being completely eradicated, not only from our own sport, but from the record books. And that's just going to continue to happen if people like the NCAA, the IOC, and different organizations continue to allow male-bodied individuals to compete in the women's category.
Let me ask you what you think about schools that are starting to crawl this back, because some of them have cooperated and some of them I think are going to be more open to it. I don't understand what Maine is doing at all, going to war with the White House. The White House is going to win this on every court challenge. But should those records even be allowed to stand, and should those medals be given back or passed down to the person that came in second, who was an actual biological female?
Well, that's exactly what Pam Bondi was stating in her lawsuit against Governor Mills in the state of Maine, is that one of the things that she is going to require is that those medals are given back to the women that they were stripped from. It was cheating, basically, by allowing somebody that has a biological advantage to take a women's spot on the podium in the next regional race, whatever the case may be. And it's not just something that we're noticing in schools, we're noticing it in states. My home state of Nevada, I would have never thought that they would have passed a legislation that would protect the women and girls there, but they recently did within the last month. So hopefully Governor Mills is next, and a bunch of other states across the United States continue to fall within the same trajectory.
If you could go back and redo anything about your college career, would you choose to?
No, I would not choose to do anything differently. I am so glad that I stood up for what I believed in. I was very fortunate to go to a university that stood behind me at the forefront of this issue.
That makes all the difference, by the way. It's a huge game changer for the athlete.
Oh, 1000%. I was very fortunate that my university president, that the athletic director of my university all stood behind me in my fight to move forward against this issue. So I'm so glad that I came out and spoke about the issue. I'm so glad that a multitude of other women have continued to come out and speak to the injustice that is allowing men in women's sports. And I'm very grateful and thankful for my time at Southern Utah University.
Well, we're going to keep up the fight here, and working with the Independent Women's Forum, who's one of my favorite organizations of all time. We are going to stand with people just like you every day and demand what's right, because it's the only way to go. Linnea Saltz, so much for all that you've done. Thank you for sharing your story with us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Kevin McCullough coming right back from Times Square. Don't go away.
McCullough.
Welcome back to That Kevin Show, thatkevinshow.com. If you want any aspect of what we're doing, Jarrett Lemaster is my guest. And Jarrett, when you're thinking about the cultural debate that's ongoing, we were just talking about free speech. There's a lot of ways that technology is beginning to impact the discussion. And you guys are kind of at the forefront of delivering most of what you do, not through a broadcast means, not through a television show or through some sort of broadcast radio, but you live your almost entire life on the streaming and on-demand digital side of the universe. How much does that give you an advantage or a disadvantage over being able to make statements quickly when events demand such?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a really good podcast by Red Pilled America. I don't know if on the history of Twitter and the conversation. And it's basically how Twitter was able to subvert sort of the mainstream legacy media and how information is now accessible, like on demand from people, like directly from the source. And so, yeah, so there's that's kind of where we live. So we live in that space where it's like, yeah, we're putting something out. There's not a whole lot of editorializing going on. It's just, this is what we have. We're going directly to our fans. And that's the way that this new technology sort of works. And, you know, the legacy media has really struggled with that. So we're in that place where, you know, we're just going to keep saying what we say, and thank God that Elon owns X so that we can.
Well, you know? And to be honest, if he hadn't bought them, this last election might not have turned out the way it did, because I do think it was him setting Twitter free that allowed the actual debate to take place. I was just listening to my morning man I mentioned last segment, Joe Piscopo, this morning as I was taking my kids to school. And he was talking about, he has a new book out, and he was talking about how he was going to have to go do this podcast thing later. And then I realized who he was talking about. It's like, it's a much bigger audience than our radio station has in the #1 market. So it's like, don't knock it, Joe. It's pretty good stuff.
Yeah.
When you sit down at the formation of the week, how many sketches do you try to get done in a given week's time? Do you put yourselves on deadline and say, this Friday we need to do another comedy sketch, we need to do another podcast? What's the world that the Babylon Bee lives?
Yeah, so we're trying to. There's a couple things going on. We have like evergreen sketches that are always going to be funny. Like evergreen sketches, like we kind of have our own category. Okay, we'll try to do maybe one of those a week, and then the rest of the time we're sort of living in that let's ride the wave of the news cycle and make fun of what's happening, because that's how we get the most views, and also it's the most relevant like comedy if you're like making fun of what's happening. So yeah, so we kind of have to. We're planned out probably about 3 weeks, maybe 2. I produce, so like I get locations and actors and cast and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, you do all the booking?
Yeah. So I book all those guys, and yeah, so I'm in the process of doing that. And so we have one of those that's going to be like, all right, this one we know is going to be funny in 5 years. But let's do these 2 that are going to be funny for the next week, and we'll see how well they do.
What's your favorite recent sketch that you've done?
Let's see, my personal favorite. So that's so funny. If I say it's one of the ones that I was in, then it sounds weird. But
no.
Yeah. No, I actually really liked our Kamala, the Satan response to Kamala's loss. I think that may be my favorite sketch.
And you do play the devil. In case people are wondering who it is, it's actually Jarrett. But
it's me. You just have to picture the horns and me just kind of
in the red paint. How long does it take you to get into makeup for that?
It's like, depends. If it's just my face, it's like an hour and a half. If it's my whole body, which I actually find, I think that's way funnier. I think when we just do the shirtless, it's way funnier for some reason. I don't know why. I think it's because traditionally the devil like is always shirtless with like goat pants. And so like I'm always like, it's so funny to see that traditional devil.
It gives you a lot of motivation to make sure you get your push-ups done too, doesn't it?
Well, I also have a guy doing my abs. Like I've got a guy like airbrushing. So like, don't think that's real. And, but we, anyway, there's that one and the one where the devil talks to the Democrats where he's just like, guys, tone it down. You know, like that to me is probably the funniest thing we've done recently. And then I really loved the James Madison sketch. Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, writing or figuring out how to come up with the Constitution. I thought that was really smart, and because it did play into it's kind of evergreen because the history of the country is always relevant. But what we're dealing with in this day and age, and talk to us about comedic delivery. But to me, timing and almost the unperformed is as much key to what you guys do as the over the top kind of obvious type of stuff. And you've got a balance in your team that really plays all of those emotions so well. Hey, you spent too long with us already. Thank you, Jarrett. Please come on back and keep making great stuff because we need it. And I know that the nation's grateful for it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. Here he is from New York. That Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to That Kevin Show. One of the things that we talk about a lot is how to rescue some of these slaves from South Sudan that got taken by people in the north back when it was just one country, Arabs mostly, Islamic jihadists who believe that they have a right to subjugate innocent women and children. They've subjected them to the most horrendous treatment for the last dozens of years. And every year we have a chance to see some of those liberated and brought home. If you'd like more information on how to give, just go to bringherhome.org. That's where you can give directly to the issue that we are talking about now. But I want to give you csi-usa.org. That is the homepage of Christian Solidarity International, and it really does go into greater detail of all the things that they are involved in, from the conflict in Syria, from the massive genocide that's been taking place in Nigeria over the last couple of years. And Rob Davis rejoins us as head of that, talking to us about this. But Rob, last year, when we would literally get on the air to talk about Nigeria, we were the only media outlet, I think, on planet Earth that was doing that. No one was covering what was happening. Now, I will say in the last few weeks that the Trump administration has acknowledged some things, and there's been just a little trickle of stories that have come out about some of the most recent atrocities. But it is still a far cry from anything that would resemble mainstream media coverage of something like that. And so I really see the value of what CSI is doing, because you've got to be standing there waving the flag saying, guys, pay attention to this. It really does matter.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't, who is? That really is what it boils down to. And so I would encourage you, your listeners. I know you gave it just a minute ago, but you can get detailed information of the various countries that we serve, the various projects that we're involved in at csi-usa.org. That's csi-usa.org. And we invite you to just take a look there. Many of these countries, again, like I was saying to you previously, Kevin, these are places we can't even find on a map. I mean, somebody in the country, where is it? Let's be honest, most of our geography just isn't that good. And we don't talk about these countries, and nobody's talking about it in the news. But there are brothers and sisters in Christ who are being slaughtered, who are being imprisoned. I was just a part of an effort to reach out to our Secretary of State this past week with regard to somebody who's been unjustly put in jail in Syria. So we're asking the State Department here to get involved. But nobody's talking about this. I mean, it's the type of thing that if you're not on our mailing list, if you're not checking our website, if you're not listening to your program, Kevin, I know you do a tremendous job of, especially as you mentioned before, Dr. Joel Veldkamp, who is our international communications director, who does a phenomenal job of briefing.
I don't know how he keeps track of everything. Like, there's so much going on, but let me just.
I'm a far cry. Joel can keep up with the best, and I'm just doing well to try and keep up with him.
Yeah, well, they've got you handling the stuff here in the U.S., and that's important, because this is where so much of the help can come from, friends. And those of you listening, some of you have given in years past, and I know that there's been a couple of people that have given in excess of $10, $15,000 to what we do with CSI. And I'm grateful for those of you that care deeply enough to dig deep and really commit. When you do that, your dollars are being magnified in terms of what they accomplish in ways that you can't even begin to imagine. But I will touch on the slavery issue for a second, Rob. This is, I don't know, it's our 115th year doing it or something like that. It feels like we've just done it since the beginning of time. But these are women that were largely spoils of war. I mean, we think of not trying to make people property, and yet that's exactly what happened in the Sudanese civil war. And when we bring them back, we give them something that I feel fairly certain they gave up a long time ago on ever believing that they would ever have again, which is a brand new life. And you're able to do it for $250, which is almost exclusively used for the resettlement and all the stuff they need to start their life over again. There's a small amount that's used for a vaccine that is bartered for the slave's release, but other than that, that is all going into giving that slave a brand new life. And I'm just curious, people have asked me, how do you do it? How do you do it for a one-time gift of $250, take someone's life and allow them to start completely over again?
Yeah, I mean, and you know, Kevin, when you think about it, $250 to give someone their life back. It really is kind of that simple. And as you said, you know, there was a civil war, and I'm dumbing this down because it's easy for me to understand. And you know, Joel can explain this a whole lot more eloquently. But it was a civil war, and essentially they said, okay, we're going to settle this thing. Muslims in the north, you can take these Christians in the south, and that's your prize. Go home. And you know,
but nobody did anything about the slaves.
Yeah, a couple 100,000 people all of a sudden lost their freedom, and ever since the late 1980s, we've been bringing them home. So apt the website you direct people to bring her home. You know, but we were able. The crazy thing is that these primarily Muslim cattle farmers value their cattle more than they value a human life. And so for what amounts to a $25 vaccine to keep their cattle from disease, they say, okay, you can take a person, go ahead. And they free them. And then the rest of that donation, as you said, the rest of that $250 is spent getting them back to their communities, getting them back to what's remaining of their families, getting them back to the churches that they had worshiped in, setting them up with some micro enterprise, giving them a goat so that they can have milk and produce cheese, giving them farming tools so that they can have a micro enterprise and do a little bit of kind of home farming and sell some vegetables and things like that, so that they can support themselves. But as you said, you've heard enough stories, Kevin, over what is it? You said these 150 years we've been together. But they almost all reference the fact they had they were crying out to God, asking for him to answer, but had felt long forgotten. And one day a slave liberator, comes into their village and buys their freedom back, essentially.
And it is really a beautiful thing. Rob, thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you for letting us be part of this. And please keep us posted on all the good news of 30 years. I mean, that is a real landmark to celebrate, and we celebrate with you this year.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
You got it. Kevin McCullough coming back from Times Square. Don't go away.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.